It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you all for your time as well. Interesting sessions we've had so far this morning. Some very interesting talks from, of course, Alexandra, from Henry, from my colleague Saad Mughal. I'd like to once again thank Rexsoft and Russiania for really accommodating us here today and for actually organizing this whole event. Now, this is probably not on the agenda. Before I go into my presentation, I'd like to do our duty or obligation. Russiania has been a fantastic partner for us last year and this year, and they've put a lot of effort into not only taking all our content and actually taking the initiative to translate that into Russian and actually spreading the good word in Russia for us. As you can see, you're all here today. So for that, Russiania has actually been nominated as our best partner in EMEA in 2017. And with that, I'd like to present Ilya with the Best Partner Trophy.
So I would just like to tell you all a little story. So maybe 3 years ago, I had an online meeting with one Russian gentleman, and his name was Ilya. And it was a very enjoyable meeting. So this time we had no customers in Russia, we had no involvement in Russia. And this meeting ended, and me and Ilya became friends. So we were Facebook friends, and we did not talk about work. So for maybe 1 year, we had no interaction about work. We were just friends. And then Ilya came back again as a professional colleague with all of these great ideas. So he is one of those business partners who does not only do what needs to be done, he tells us what we need to do for the Russian region. And this is something we are very grateful for. So Ilya and Alexei and all of the team, thank you so much, and we are really looking forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you, Ilya. Thank you. And now I'll hand back to Imran.
Okay, back to business then, shall we? Right, you've heard earlier Henry speak about GDPR, and you're probably wondering, what do we have to do with this new EU legislation? It doesn't affect us. We don't really care about it. Or some of you might have heard about it, do care about it. For those who don't know why Russia should care about this, is because suddenly you've now got double jurisdiction that you need to comply with. Of course, you've got your own Russian data protection legislation and jurisdiction from Roskomnadzor. Apologies, my Russian is not great, as you can tell, yeah? And they're in charge, of course, as the regulator in Russia. And what you'll find is there's a lot of overlap between the new EU GDPR legislation, which is coming in effect on the 25th of May 2018, that everyone's preparing for at the moment. There's a lot of overlap with that and what already exists here. But it's a bit more stringent, and it applies a burden on every organization out there that either acts as a data processor or collects any data or wants to do any trade with the EU, exchanges any information with the EU. So there's a burden on already the e-commerce online sort of organizations that want to be able to trade with the EU, for example. There's also already a burden, if you think we don't trade with the EU, there's already a burden for partners, for contractors, because the EU organizations will need to ensure that basically their Russian partners, their contractors, their suppliers also comply with this. It's mandated on them. And if you're wondering why is a big deal about it, is because there's some hefty fines. Just to give you an example, for non-compliance, it's about 4% of your total revenues or 20 million euros, whichever is higher. So that already should catch attention of a lot of the C-level members who need to understand why this is important for them. I don't know what Roskomnadzor is doing at the moment about this jurisdiction and if they're going to take the scope of it and accept it. But I think I'll let the Russian and the EU lawyers sort that out. That's not my agenda. My agenda is to say, how can we actually, as architects or as an enterprise architecture practice, assist with an integrated approach to actually ensure that we are aligning to this new legislation that's coming in. Yeah. So that's where I'm coming from. I'll just move from this here. So next one here is just a bit about me, but not necessarily myself. I've worked with Orbis Software for 9.5 years now. Quite a lot of implementations across the whole of Europe, Middle East, Africa. and a lot of experience with all sorts of organizations. So you can see our customers are across all verticals. So, whether it's government, education institutions, financial services, production industries. So it's all verticals. This slide is one I have a challenge keeping up to date with every day because we are adding new customers every week. This snapshot was taken at the end of September, 470, because I couldn't keep up with it. We're on track to do another 52 customers before we end this year already. So that's why I have a challenge keeping up with this. So I'll move on from here about myself and into this area here, which is basically saying these are the sort of aspects I intend to cover for today's session in focus of GDPR. By the way, all the images, diagrams, snapshots that you'll see here today, these are all from the ISO tool that my colleague Saad Mughal was able to demonstrate earlier. I think one of the messages that came from Alexander's presentation early in the morning was this visibility, providing this visibility to the C-level, who are very busy. They don't have time to go and look for all this information in different places. They want one area where they can find that information, and it needs to be presented to them in a business user-friendly manner so they can make those informed decisions quickly. Okay? So we'll look at some of those aspects today. And just running through here, so I'm just going to introduce you to basically some of the concepts here and what this GDPR is all about and how basically ISO can assist. So when does it come into effect? As I mentioned, 25th of May next year is when all companies in the EU and any companies that are trading with the EU or have some sort of partners, any entities will need to show compliance with this here. Yeah. And as you can see in the UK, for example, very similar to your Russian jurisdiction of data protection, we have what we call the ICO. Of course, UK has its own challenges because we are still negotiating Brexit. So until that time, we'll know what's happening, but we've got to be prepared for it as well. Yeah. So the ICA also provides its own personal information impact analysis, which we'll see shortly. I presume something similar will be taken into consideration as well for Russia as well, down the line. I'm hoping so. Yeah. So a lot of these slides, I can't read the text on it. I have to remind myself. So I'm skimming through most of these here because of the time here as well. But more importantly is these concepts that we need to factor in when working towards that compliance. As the who, what, where, how, when of data, really. We're in a digital world. Data is portable. Data is everywhere. And EU, the legislation that's coming in now in GDPR is very stringent about some of these aspects, as Henry mentioned, in terms of making sure that you can actually not only show compliance for data privacy, but you can actually prove it. You need to be able to prove it now. You need to be able to give the consumers, the people that you collect data for, you need to give them the choice, the consent to say, yes, I want you to collect my data. You need to show that you've actually been able to give them the option to say, I need you to forget me, erase everything about me. So from the 25th of May next year, you'll be able to go to LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter for all your good deeds and sins and say, forget me, I don't want to be on this. And you'll be able to do that. That's the power it's bringing to the people. Yeah. So these are the different steps to achieving that. In terms of, first of all, of course, you need to have your data inventory in order. And I think one of the gentlemen here was asking about a glossary, maintain a glossary of data, which becomes the foundation and central point of reference for building anything else. It's speaking a common language, first of all, is to understand what's our data inventory. Be able to then classify that. Once you've classified it, then you'll be able to analyze it and identify where are the risks, where do we need to comply with those risks. And this is where standards come in as well. So we'll touch on some of those. And then after that is to be able to see the impact of these risks. And finally, be able to actually show that you're actually complying to prove that. How do you do that? Again, you'll have to provide some sort of visibility. It's no good saying, oh yes, we are compliant. It'll be more about how are you compliant? Show it to us. Yeah. And that's the important bit here. So this is a screenshot taken from ISO again. You can see the first step is your data inventory, getting it right. So just like what my colleague earlier was showing you, you can have a list of objects in the repository. They don't necessarily need to exist on diagrams or documents immediately, but just collating that information in one area allows you to capture more information about them. So you can see some examples of data about appointment, assets, audit, and you can start collecting more information in terms of categorization. of its confidentiality, being able to see its classification, whether it's private, it's restricted, and being able to build on that information. Because later on what you'll be able to do then is to use this data to generate visuals for the relevant audience that want to be able to see that in different formats. Whether it's on process diagrams showing the flow, whether it's on dashboards and reports, as we'll see shortly. Yeah. So using that same data, for example, you can then utilize, I think another question came here with the integration side of things. Very important, being able to then display the same information you have there to various audiences. So this is a snapshot of a dashboard of that same data that's in iServer, but using BI tools like Power BI, Tableau, Click, any other BI tool really. Just being able to present those in a nice manner to the business to quickly understand the implications of what you're dealing with here. Yeah. So your classification then, we move on to the next step here. And this is where we bring in this picture here. So the saying goes, of course, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Right? And I've just taken that, modified it slightly, saying those are all little pictures there, but really it's a data-driven picture that speaks 10,000 words. And having your pictures driven by data, by facts, is what the CIO today, the CEO needs today, because that's what is going to determine which direction the business takes. Yeah. So it's very important to actually represent this information in a visual way, not having to go through a lot of documentation and all that. Yeah. So here is an example of the same data that you're seeing there, but this is now represented for a specific audience. This is using Archimate, which is one of the standards from the Open Group as well. Archimate is a modeling notation. Very popular, growing popular now. Archimate 3 is the current version. And this is now taking the same data and all the information that you capture behind it in terms of confidentiality, privacy, other aspects, and being able to heat map. So at a glance, someone can see the landscape and know where do I need to put my firefighting energy to actually ensure that we are compliant in that particular area. That's one way of representing it, using one of the standards, Archimate. This is a different aspect. This is looking at it from a TOGAF perspective. So it's the same data again, but then this is for someone else who wants to see that data only from a privacy perspective. Where does it apply? Where are the risks that we have at the moment in your different business channels? Again, you're representing that same data for a different audience who wants to see it in that way. And you're able to do this very quickly, simply because it's the same data in the repository. And you don't have to maintain this manually. Any change you make on any of these aspects in one place propagates across all your documentation and all your diagrams, saving you a lot of time having to manually manage this sort of content as well. Yeah. This was mentioned earlier, so we added this slide here just to bring everyone's attention back here. This is very much around where our vision lies as well as Orbis software. So the 6 hexagons that you're seeing there, those are what we call business and IT management domains. A lot of organizations will have this. Enterprise architecture is just one of those domains. Of course, with enterprise architecture, you've got strategy, business, data, application, technology, security, and so on. The interesting thing here is that we provide solutions around all of these here, and GDPR and data classification, inventory, and actually analysis affects all of those domains of people that are working there. And iServer comes in right in the middle here. Why? Because it's no longer sort of enough just to say, we are going to work as EAs in one area. The project office can work separately, the portfolio guys separately, the business guys separately. No, because today the stakeholders that are working within these domains have a wider interest. So people who are working on the architecture space have an interest on the processes. They have an interest on the portfolio side of things. They want to know how they are aligning to their programs and their prioritization of their programs. So there's a convergence of interest. And that's why I think Henry also mentioned about ITIL, for example. And some of those standards we're going to be seeing, for example, like prints, which will become redundant in the very near future because of their methodology with the new trends that are coming across. So you'll find it's not only stakeholders' interests that are converging, but it's also standards. So you'll notice there's a standard there called IT for IT. This came out last year. It's been there with HP for 10 plus years. It's just rebranded and reflagged under the Open Group. And IT for IT is actually a convergence of those standards there. The TOGAF, the COBIT, the ITIL, the Archimate, to actually form a single framework for running your business of IT. because IT is the business. There is no separation between IT and this is IT and this is business. That model is gone. Your business is IT and IT is your business. And for organizations to survive in the future, they'll have to take that sort of approach as well. Yeah. So I'll move on here to show you a few other pretty diagrams here. I'm not too sure how visible they are to the audience at the back, so apologies for that. But you can see some pretty colors, that's good. But these are different flows from different standards, showing you how data is flowing between your applications, for instance, how it's flowing through the different systems at the high level. And you can drill down, as we saw, from those high-level strategy, objectives, goals, programs, capabilities, right down to these low-level models, and present those to specific stakeholders who have an interest in that area. Again, you can see this a different diagram here, just showing you a technology layer, a very simple diagram, just showing you where data is being consumed, or where is data stored, in which components, which areas there. And you've got, from a process perspective here, showing you how data is flowing through your different processes within your business, within a particular area. Okay? So you can actually view your data in a three-dimensional way. The same you could say for your processes or anything else. If I want to see this data from a process perspective, I can generate a view. I want to see this data from a technology perspective, I've got a view. If I want to see it from the application side, I can see that as well. And if I want to see it from a value perspective from the business, I can also demonstrate that. This is, again, saying that same data, someone else, I'm not interested in diagrams, they're all lines and boxes, they don't make sense to me. But I just want to be able to see where is our data being consumed, where is it being stored. You can generate very pretty dashboards here, as you can see, using the same data that's coming from iServer. Yeah. Some of this is coming from operational tools. Some of this is actually being modeled as part of your design and strategy in iServer. But collating all that information and then presenting this sort of picture to the C-level, to your senior managers, is what they're looking for as an architect. Because architects have the biggest impact in this space here, because you are the ones who are dealing with disruptive technologies on a daily basis. And you are the ones who've got this holistic view on what the enterprise is doing today and what it's going to do in 5 years as part of the roadmap. Actually, if you look at the trends on LinkedIn, you'll find, interestingly, the other day I was finding the enterprise, long ago, when you used to ask someone in an organization, what is an architect? And the response would be, normally it's either people with gray hair who have been in the organization for a very, very long time, and they know everything about the company. And that's an architect. Right? And then we evolved from that phase where we had younger people who were coming in, both from the knowledge perspective, but also getting up to speed using standards, methodologies, and applying those to, again, what's in practice. And now I'm finding the architect title actually changing recently. On LinkedIn, I was looking at the variance of how people have changed now their titles from architect to data scientists. Because going forward, the architects will need to be data scientists, because we're being hit by data from all sorts of different areas. And being able to collate that data, manipulate it, and get value out of it, business-driven value and customer-driven value, is probably one of the biggest things that's going to make a difference between the organization today and a successful one tomorrow. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to leave you a few slides. So here we are. This is saying, okay, yes, we've collected our data, we've classified it, fantastic. Now, what else can we do with it? Because remember, architecture is not a project. It doesn't end. It's an ongoing thing. We're evolving. And every time we're looking for ways of improving and becoming better at how our enterprises position themselves and how competitive we can be and what values we can provide to our customers and citizens. So here's another standard I'm going to introduce. I've mentioned quite a few standards. Sorry about all the acronyms. But there's another one called FAIR here, which is again by the Open Group, which is basically another standard for risk management. So once you have your data, you can start generating this sort of values, where you can see, for example here, I can see a bubble chart, which is looking at things like technology fit and business fit, and prioritizing which applications should we keep in the business, which ones are too expensive for us and are redundant, have zero value to the business, to become more agile. On the other side, you can see in terms of metrics, the primary loss versus basically the magnitude of that loss and how hard it'll hit your organization, your customers, and your partners as well. So that's just another view from the risk assessment side of things. And here we've got a few other examples. Again, this is just a zoom in to the diagrams I showed previously. So here is someone looking at data and the different services and the risks, where the risks are. So you're taking the same views that we saw previously during your classification phase to demonstrate how you classify data, where it sits, and which application is speaking. But now you're taking one more layer and saying, let's start looking at where our risk areas are. How can we avert this risk? And this is, again, just showing you views of those as well. This here is another standard yet for information security, ISO 27002/12. We have quite a few other security standards that are coming up at the moment. So we've got SABSA, we've got the Open Group, Open Security Framework, we've got NITS. There are quite a few different frameworks that come with these risks and controls that are fully populated. Now I'm showing you all this because a lot of this content is already, you're probably thinking, where do we find all this content? We have to start building all this content, or we have to start aligning this. The good thing is, again, with iServer, with the out-of-box solutions we provide, the accelerators, those come pre-populated, a lot of these things. They're already in there. And you don't have to start from scratch. All you're doing is identifying which bits here are relevant to us as an organization. And you start off with those bits, and then you can extend those concepts as you grow. But at the same time, you're aligning with those standards because that was your starting point. So all we're saying is, you don't have to spend a lot of time rethinking or reinventing the wheel. These standards are there for a reason. There's thousands of hours of thinking that have gone into these standards. And yes, they are standards. They're not a one-fits-all. But you've got a starting point to build on from. Yeah. This here is a snapshot of the ICO personal data impact analysis. So this is some of the processes. I presume the Federal Service for Supervision of Communication, Information Technology, and Mass Communication in Russia will probably have similar processes down the line that they will, as a regulator, will be mandating at some point down the line, we're hoping, which will be something you can comply with as well. And here we come to some more detail about ICO PIA, where they provide a lot of this. This is, again, out of the box. The high-level goals, objectives, risks, all those are already provided for you. All you've got to do is map them to your specific architectures. Now, now that we're happy with that, how do we show compliance then? So my colleague earlier showed you Portal. So Portal is our web browser interface, which means for business users, stakeholders, in this case now your regulator or your auditors, you don't have to share the entire repository, but you can provide a very simple web front for them to be able to access this information, either via their mobile devices, iPads. You can actually also publish this content onto SharePoint sites. So if you're using SharePoint already, you can just publish a snapshot for your auditors there. You don't have to worry about preparing this documentation because it's coming live from your repository. And that means you can get a snapshot for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years ago. This is where we are in terms of our compliance. And you're actually tracking that and showing value to the business of what effectively architecture is doing to get you towards that line there. Yeah. So I'll try and sum up now because I'm looking at the time there as well, coming up. But all in all, what I'll say here is these are the different aspects you can use to share the information. It's not one way. The important bits that are probably highlighted there are the familiar icons you're seeing dotted across our banners there, our presentations. It's Excel, it's Visio, it's Word, it's PowerPoint. It's your day-to-day tools. The whole point of this is saying our ethos at Orbis Software is about keeping it simple. And the best way to keep it simple is not to try and bring in a tool where the business needs to fit around the tool. It's actually bringing in a solution that fits around your business because you are already using this. You're already using PowerPoint, you're already using Excel, you're already using Visio, Word. And if you can get your business to be part of that, then you're on your way to success. Yeah. So with that, I'll end up here. I mean, those are my details there. If you want to keep in touch, I am on LinkedIn until 25th of May next year. I shall be there. So please feel free to get in touch.